Yeah, so I was saying that today we will be looking at the third module of the advanced training. Um, I'm sorry that I'm definitely sure. I don't know if we all know each other on the call now. And generally, it's Mark who chair these sessions. So I don't know if you'd allow me to continue with the presentation, and we would introduce each other through the discussion. I don't know. Is that okay?
Kanda, that does make sense. Let's start
Okay.
and we'll introduce as and when we say anything.
Yeah. So I'm sorry if I look a little bit all over the place today. It's been quite an heavy day for me. I was not around. I was not in the country. I came back um, on Sunday night, and I'm back at work today. So I'm quite all over the place, but definitely very motivated and looking forward to our afternoon, this evening discussion on this important topic, which is logotherapy, a paradigm shift. I thought I should share my thoughts or all I understand by paradigm, but you are more than welcome to stop me anytime, and I hope we'd have time to interact. There are indeed many ways of looking at realities, and all those different type of looking at realities can be called paradigms. And generally, we are called to change, to adapt our paradigms every time the reality of things are not working as expected. So logotherapy proposes us a new way, a different way of looking at our reality and our existence. So in my presentation here, I would like just to actually argue for the relevance of a new paradigm represented by logotherapy, and that's why that the question is why logotherapy. And actually, for all students, all of us as students of logotherapy, including myself, the question we can keep asking ourselves is, why do I have to study logotherapy? Why study something else besides other things we have studied before? Could it be that we are looking for a better way of understanding ourselves, a better way of existing, or could it be just we want to have more knowledge for the sake of knowledge and other reasons? So I thought I should share with you a quite recent quote from a writer who have written a quite interesting book titled The Coming Wave, AI, that is artificial intelligence, power and our future. In other words, we know we are in the AI era today. So I believe this author is quite knowledgeable in when it comes to AI, and he has written this to say the idea that technology alone can solve social and political problems is a dangerous delusion. But the idea that we can be the idea that this problem can be solved without technology is also wrong-headed. So as much as we are all up about AI and so on as a technology, things have progressed, we have to be mindful that that is not going to provide us with the final or with the solution to all our problems, specifically social and political problems. And I would like to include spiritual problem as well, as we generally do not consider the spiritual issues. But some years back, as some of you know, I am talking from a medical perspective. So whatever I'm going to say here would come from that perspective. But I would invite you to also look in your own field, in your own area where you come from, even if it's just of household of being a parent. How does logotherapy, how is it needed in that setting? So some years back, this doctor wrote that what we have yet to discover, and it is probably beyond our mental or reason to do so at this moment, is how emotional phenomenon phenomena can stimulate physiological one. So you'd see here in this quote, it's basically about emotions and the physiology, which refers to the functioning of the body. And his book is titled "The Healing Back Pain: The Mind-Body Connection." And indeed, nowadays we quite often speak of mind-body most of the time, but is that all it is to the story? So why do we need a paradigm shift? I believe we need this paradigm shift because the body-mind a connection present us with a challenge. And the challenge is about how do we integrate the physical, the psychological, and the spiritual dimension. About this, another author has quoted Frankl as saying that the physical makes possible the psychological activation of a spiritual demand. You'd see in this quote that Frankl brings the third dimension beside the body and mind. He brings the spiritual dimension. And Frankl further says in one of his books titled The Unconscious God, Psychotherapy and Theology, he says, instead of talking of spiritual existence and psychophysical facticity, we may speak of the spiritual person and its psychophysical overlay. By it, we mean to emphasize that the person has a psychophysical overlay, whereas the person is spiritual. In this quote, to my understanding, Frankl would like to suggest, and actually saying, we are primarily spiritual being with a body and a mind. It is very important for us if we have to think in terms of paradigm. As I said, we have the one paradigm which focus only on the body and the mind. Frankl proposes us another paradigm which include the spiritual dimension, and even when goes further to say that spiritual dimension is the central one because that is what defined a human being. So a human being is first and foremost a spiritual being who has a body and a mind. So in this situation, in our moment, the time, era, or period of our life, we could ask, why then should we propose logotherapy as the new paradigm, as opposed to the previous paradigm we have been having, that of mind-body connection paradigm? Frankl has written to say, for too long, we have been dreaming a dream from which we are now waking up. The dream that if we just improve the socioeconomic situation of people, everything will be okay. People will be happy. The truth is that as the struggle for survival has subsided, the question has emerged, survival for what? ever more people today have the means to live, but no meaning to live for. I thought these quotes apply to our situation today, as we have said it in the previous discussion we had, that we are living in a paradoxical situation where we have an advanced technological progress, scientific progress, and people can make money and so on. But that does not provide us with a fulfillment as human beings. Because, as Frankl says, as much as we sort out the issue of poverty, of suffering, and so on, we survive. The next question is that of surviving for what? So now, if we want to look at it from an African perspective as well, which is important, is to say the African has their own worldview as well, where they would say, for example, in French, that le mort ne sont pas morts. It's an African saying in French, which means dead people are not dead. And why do they say that? Is because African people, in this case, the Bantu-speaking people, they view a human being as made of body, spirit, and what they call shadow. The point of fairly general consensus, the agreement, is that the dead continue to live in some form or another, and they do so through their spiritual dimension. I thought I should share this because it kind of supports, or it's in agreement with suggestion of Frankl that we are not only body and mind, but we are primarily spiritual being. And just to give more support to what I'm suggesting it from an African worldview, among the Northern Sotho people, they said that human beings are made of physical body and what they call moya, general life-living, life-giving, and exclusively human attribute, and siriti, an individual personal attribute generally considered as the character or personality of an individual. You'd see the moya, which is mostly the most important here, which says it's exclusively human attribute, which I believe would be what Frankl called the spiritual dimension, which Frankl believe as well that what makes human being to be human is the spiritual dimension. And it makes them different from animals and other beings. However, this African worldview, it is quite often misinterpreted and sometimes disappeared when we interact, especially in clinical setting. Like some authors, they've gone, for example, to suggest that the Shona people, they look at the model, the concept of Shona views of human being from the Freudian model, which actually is reductionist because it reduces the spirit to the superego, which is not the case. The spirit is not a superego, as in the previous slide and Frankl perspective. That is the core of being a human being, and it is totally different from the concept of superego from a Freudian model. And by the way, the Freudian model does not consider at all the spiritual dimension. And it is very important to realize this, that the African people clearly do not consider superego as spirit, as in the previous slide, where it clearly says Moya, which is the spirit here, is the general life-giving and exclusively human attribute. And even if we misunderstand misunderstand the African perspective of what is a human being. We know, for those who are interacting with African people, that there are beliefs which are persistent, regardless of the scientific and the modern progress. Beliefs such Moya, which refer to a spirit possession as a calling, Buloi, which refers to witchcraft as a call to be to protect oneself from this negative influence. Madimade as a belief into a bad luck, as a call to support other human beings who are going through difficult moment. But this belief of Moya, Buloi referring to witchcraft, or Madimade referring to bad luck, are still persistent. And they do come from time to time in the session or in the way people view themselves when they are exposed to challenging situation in their life. So I go on to say that unfortunately, the Ubuntu principle, which we also referred to in the previous discussion, which calls for restoration of self and community through ritual, is less practiced. And this ritual generally refers again to the spiritual dimension of a human being. I thought I should just share this to say African worldview does place spirit and consider it as the main attribute of being human being. And based on that view, they do have a number of beliefs which refers to that. And in practice, when there are unfortunate events, they go through rituals as a way of mobilizing the spiritual dimension to restore oneself or the community. So now let's come back to logotherapy. In general then, and these are things I'm sure you know, but I thought I should just refer to them to actually support that logotherapy is providing us with a framework of looking at what it is to be a human being and what is our existence. So as I mentioned earlier, there is this three-dimensional view of being human, that we are made of the physical, psychological, and spiritual dimension. And at the spiritual dimension, Frankl suggests through logotherapy that the spiritual dimension is characterized by the freedom of will to meaning, and meaning of life. And that spiritual dimension provides us with the spiritual capacities, including the intuitive knowledge, which is a way of knowing, a way of learning, the self-distancing and self-transcendence. I thought these capacities are very, very important to mention here because we would come back later. So, having said that we are primarily spiritual beings, Frankl would suggest that our primary motivational factor is the search for meaning. We are there we are not after pleasure or looking for power, but we are primarily made to search for meaning in our life. Now, the question is, how do we do that? And logotherapy proposes that there are three avenues or pathways to meaning. The first one is made of creative values. These are these are activities which we can engage to provide gifts to other people, to the world around us. Then we have the experiential values. These are moments or experience where we receive gifts from the world and from other people. And finally, we have the attitudinal values, which are referring to the right attitude we are called to have when we are faced with what Frankl called fate. Fate is situation which we cannot change. And generally, these refer to painful suffering situation, and unavoidable situation. In such situation, we are called to find the right attitude to cope with whatever fates we are faced with. Now, logotherapy provides as well techniques or ways we can use to facilitate the search and the fulfillment of meaning, and in so doing, either apply it on ourselves or applying it within an individual session or group session to allow people to discover their calling in the moment as their meaning of the moment, and realize their values and fulfill the meaning of the moment they are going through. So these main three techniques are Socratic dialogue, which is mainly based on the intuitive knowledge. This technique is used with the strong belief that the person we are working with is a spiritual being, and by being spiritual, this person has got access to his or her intuitive knowledge about what they are going through and what is the calling of the moment for their moment. So based on this, we cannot impose our values or meaning on other people. We can only invite them. We can only listen to them to allow them to discover intuitively what is their calling and what is their meaning to fulfill or values to realize in each moment in their life. The second technique, it's called de-reflection. This technique is based on self-transcendence, which refers to our capacity as a human being to always be oriented or to always be in a movement of reaching out to other beings or other things in the world, that we are oriented and reaching out to other people other than ourselves. The third technique is paradoxical intention. This one is based on our capacity of self-distancing, that we have the capacity to see ourselves from a distance and be able to decide on which attitude to take in a particular situation. It is on this self-distancing capacity that the sense of humor is based, that we have the capacity to laugh at ourselves even when we go through the most challenging moment in our life. So with what I've just said, you realize then that logotherapy moves from problems or emotion to meaning. That is, we said, we are primarily motivated by the search for meaning. So we are there not necessarily called to solve problems or to deal with our emotions, but we are primarily there to respond to the calling of the moment as the meaning of the moment. And if we agree on that, then the search for meaning, it's facilitated through picking up what we call logo int, or the cues of values which allows the fulfillment of the meaning of the moment. So in each encounter with our fellow human being, it's important for us to be oriented toward what is meaningful, what is worth in our life and life of other people, so that we can pick up the values life is calling us to realize. And by doing so, then we will respond to the calling of each moment. So again, coming from the medical perspective, or even from the counseling perspective, there is a calling today that we need to find an integrative approach to the way we relate, or the way we support, the way we treat other human beings. That whatever approach we have should be integrative, should be, some would talk of all person, that we should not be only looking at the body and ignoring the mind and the spirit, but we have to look at the three dimensions and consider as well the context within which our fellow human beings are living in. So I would like to suggest that logotherapy does allow us to have this integrative approach by being able to integrate the body and mind through the spirit. You'd remember the first one of the previous quotes I shared with you that relate the spirit, the mind, and the body. And I believe that by doing so, then logotherapy, through the search for meaning, this search for meaning can result into what others type of therapy of counseling have been looking for. What is catharsis? It's a way of trying to bring out some of the emotions which have been repressed for years, with the belief that if that emotions comes up, that one can go through healing. So logotherapy is not after such emotions, but we believe that as we take our as we facilitate the search for meaning, those emotions which need to become to emerge would emerge. But I don't know if what I'm trying to say is that then the catharsis then is not the focus, is not the aim. The catharsis is a byproduct, is a consequence of the search for meaning. The same as well with psychoeducation. It's through the search for meaning that the one can also, it's the search for meaning can result in a psychoeducation, in a form where one realizes what life is about, how life is worth it, how meaning is unconditional. And these are things we discussed in our previous discussion, that it was very important for us to have that firm belief in the fact that meaning is unconditional, and that by allowing our client or patient or fellow human being in our interaction, in the way we meet them as spiritual being, they would learn to realize how their life is worth, and how themselves as being are worth, and how life is calling them to respond to the meaning in life. And by being truly meaning oriented, we also would be supportive, because we are actually addressing the main issue, the main challenging issue of being a human being. And we support our fellow human being to find their meaning in the moment. And that process would result in a kind of support. And of course, the insight, we are not there to look for understanding of events or phenomenon which are happening. The understanding and the insight is also an or a byproduct of the search for meaning. That one, as is engaged in searching, in looking for what is meaningful in their life, they would, by the way, discover who they are, and that they would get into a process of self-discovery. And the same as well with self-actualization. Self-actualization is not a goal in logotherapy, but it is a byproduct of the search for meaning. Because as we fulfill the calling of each moment, we are actually in the process of actualizing our potential and becoming what we are called to be. So there is also another call for us to be considering the multicultural context we are living in today. You'd realize that in different contexts, we are called to relate and meet people from different cultural backgrounds. And that becomes so important for us to consider the cultural background of people we are living with. Because by ignoring the cultural background, we run the risk of hurting other people by not considering their values and their beliefs. But you'd realize that logotherapy is based on the premises that all human beings are spiritual beings. And this is so important that we will always, at all time, even with people, in the case of a medical setting, people who are in coma, we still consider them as spiritual beings, and they have to be treated with dignity and respect. That is so important in any context, because dignity and respect are actually part of universal values, which is the right for every human being. The other aspect of logotherapy, which allows us to survive in a multicultural context, is the understanding that meaning is unconditional. Meaning is not linked to a particular situation or to a particular condition. All human beings have a meaningful life to live. All human beings are worth to be treated as human beings with their own calling. And as I've mentioned before, we cannot impose our meaning on other people. Ours is to listen to each human being who comes in contact with us. You remember in one of the previous presentation, we talked about encounter. And it's in that encounter, if we need to truly encounter another human being at a human level, is only when we consider that being as a spiritual being who has his or her own unique meaning. And as such, that meaning is unconditional, is not related to social, cultural status or the physical or other racial condition. And lastly, as we have mentioned before, the search for meaning or meaning is fulfilled through the realization of values. So we logotherapy consider values as avenues to realize or fulfill meaning. And values are actually universal or shared meaning, meaning that regardless of our cultural differences, or as human beings, we do have shared meaning or universal meaning. One of them, an example, would be love. Love is a value which is shared by all human beings, regardless of the context where they come from. Of course, based on their cultural background, different people have different way of expressing and realizing love. I thought I should end my presentation with 3 warnings. It might look simplistic, but it's, for me, very important in the world where we are living in today. For us to realize that power without responsibility leads to violence. Every time we exercise whatever power we have without a sense of responsibility, we run the risk of hurting other people around us. So it is important for us to realize that we are not there just because we want to have power. We are there as responsible human beings. And the other warning is that money without love leads to addiction. As you know, one can never have enough money in life, that we can find ourselves in an unending search for more money, and that is actually a form of addiction, that the more money we make, we feel like making more money than what we have. And that happens quite often when we do not have that ability, or when we do not have the ability, when we are not aware of people we need to love around. Because the moment we experience love of ourselves and people around us, that generally makes us fulfilled, that money does not necessarily become the aim and the thing we have to run after. And in the last warning, and generally this applied in academic environment or scientific environment where we are working, is to say that knowledge, what I wanted to say is knowledge without wisdom. Sorry for that. Knowledge without wisdom leads to depression. When we run after knowledge just for the sake of having knowledge and not realizing that beyond knowledge there is wisdom, we are more likely to run into depression and frustration. And you'd realize that violence, addiction, and depression are actually part of what Frankl called the consequence of existential vacuum. So I thought these were some of the ideas or arguments or views I wanted to share with you today to support logotherapy as a new paradigm shift, and hoping that as students in logotherapy, we would be aware of that shift, of moving from the way we have been doing things to a new way or new approach of treating ourselves and treating other people in our life. Thank you very much for your attention.
Dr. Kanda, thank you very much for your presentation. It's the first one I've actually attended, and I have now every intention of going back to the first 2, because it's very comprehensive and easy to understand. I wanted to ask you, there was one time that you explained which interested me. It was one of the African ones, and you said something about the 3 levels being body, spirit, and shadow.
Mm-hmm.
What did you mean by shadow in that context?
Look, I'm not an expert in African belief. Of course, I've studied anthropology. So for me, the shadows here would refer to to our emotions. I think Dr. Mandu is here with me. She might correct me, but they would refer to our emotions, the kind of aura or feel, how will I call it, vibe we bring around. That's how I would understand it. I might be wrong, but yes.
Sorry, I misunderstood what you said. I was thinking that shadow is what's left after we've died. Was that not right? Did I not hear correctly?
No, I would suggest that what left when we die, I would suggest is the spirit. Because remember, and
Yeah.
of course, I'm seeing it
In this paradigm, in this example, obviously.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah. That's very interesting.
Yeah, but yeah, that thank you very much. That would call for more discussion and search for people who are really in deep of the African views. But I thought I should share this just to support, because when I started studying logotherapy and applying it, one of the comment or objection I had from my colleague was that logotherapy is not African. It's a European concept. Okay, so with that, through my anthropology studies as well, I realized that that's not the case. Logotherapy is sometimes I actually believe it's African by nature. And I did visit Israel. Someone told me that where you are standing in Israel, it's more connected to Africa than to Europe on a geographical level. But that could be more complicated philosophical discussion. But the most important thing is to say, African or not African, we are all spiritual beings. And it is important to treat each other in that way. I'm seeing Dr. Mandu hand is up. Dr. Mandu, please go ahead.
Okay. Okay, I have thought to comment on the issue around the shadow.
Yes.
So before then, it would indicate the limitation in terms of language when it explains some of the concepts in the African context. So because some people will think that the shadow is what is left behind when we die, but actually the shadow in our context, meaning Siriti, in Zulu they say, it's tunzi. It's like you are covering. When you are born, you are given this natural covering that is can be likened to dignity. So you go with it wherever you are. So it's part of you. And if it is compromised somehow, perhaps because of your behavior or because maybe your involvement in some spiritual activities that are not acceptable, the individual will end up saying, sometimes even when they come to counseling, they'll say, my covering, I feel so naked because my covering has been taken away from me. But just bringing the covering concept, but it's not necessarily covering. It's a deeper spiritual covering that goes with you wherever you are. So that is part of you. It might seem as if it's spiritual, but it might seem as if it's spirit, but it's actually spirit plus the aura plus the presence of the ancestors around you. That's what I wanted to clarify, that we in concepts like this, we might have a limitation in terms of explaining the exact feeling as it is experienced by people of African ancestry. Thank you, sir.
No, thank you very much. Seeing Pan have also query Aura. So it's a very tricky dimension, and I'm so thankful that you have brought that correction. I'm so thankful, and I hope we would have an opportunity to talk more about that with you in future, because it's very important. That especially the aspect you brought when someone comes in a session, it said, is a kind of vibe, a kind of covering, as you said, around one person. And how do you pick it up? How do you experience it? And if someone says, I feel like this covering have been damaged, how do they experience it? And that's how I'd said, and I'm not necessarily saying shadow refer to emotions, but I have a feeling that it's connected to that. The way one feels that particular shadow result in a particular sense of feeling one can have, a sense of emotion one can go through. But the line is very blurred. But thank you very much. Carol, I saw your hand is up.
I'd love to discuss that more with you, Dr. Mandu. Just what kind of crossed my mind is the shadow in the Jungian world. You talk about a cover. Now, a cover in the Jungian shadow concept would be the dark side, or the side we don't want to acknowledge, but when we need to go to, or we need to confront, or we need to integrate into our lives. So Dr. Mandu, when you said cover, and I did struggle to hear you, would that be kind of similar, or have I misunderstood?
It's similar. It's just that in myself, in terms of explaining it so that it could be understood in the Western perspective, it's a little bit difficult, because it also embraces the presence of the ancestor as part of this individual. So because of some activities where this individual will feel that I'm alone, it feels like part of me that is connected to the people in the connected to the living dead is no longer part of me. So I am alone. So I need to feel like I'm worth, because I now have a cover. So it's a matter. It's not just an ordinary covering. It's more spiritual, in the sense that it also embraces the element of the ancestors. And I think even what Kanda was talking about, that there's also an element of emotion as well. So it gives this, what can I say, a picture of this individual in total, incorporating all the dimensions of the body, as in the physical, the shadow that I'm covering, okay? And then the mind, the spiritual aspect, meaning that even the ancestors are involved. So I would like to encourage you that don't be worried about having a better understanding of it, because of our limitations in terms of explaining and trying to define certain African words. Which is what Professor Mkize was bringing forth, that sometimes these people, especially people of African ancestry, will come with the issues, and it becomes a problem in the session to get into what exactly they need or they are suffering from, because of the limitation of the explanation of some concept in their context. Yes.
Dr. Mandu, I think that I understand. I understand the limitations of explaining something for the purposes of understanding it. But I also really do find personally that I learn a lot by holding two things up against each other. And somehow looking at the differences, I find a very, very good way of understanding and learning something. But I do understand the limitations of explaining something across cultures, because sometimes we don't have the words.
That this aspect is so important, and it's justify the new paradigm. The material paradigm of focusing on the body, focus on what we can see, what we can manipulate, what we can perceive with our senses. But the spiritual dimension brings another aspect. Actually, the African and other people in the world refer to the invisible world. And the invisible world cannot always be easily explained and described the way we describe the visible world. And by saying so, sometimes it could be like we are running away from our ignorance. But no, we are actually admitting, and this is where the difference between knowledge and wisdom comes in. We are admitting that whatever we know is limited. So the concept of shadow in this case is a concept which is more easily experienced if someone is aware of it, going through, then explain and taught to someone. I don't know if it makes sense. And that's why I even said, and that's the reason why I said it refers to the vibe, referred to the emotions. I don't know if the emotion is the right word, but the atmosphere, the feeling, one, like right now, here we are now. There is a feel, there is a vibe. I don't know how to describe it. And as Dr. Mandu says, this shadow from the African culture links us to the ancestors. And that could even refer to what we said, the Socratic dialogue is based on the intuitive knowledge. These are knowledge which is accessible not necessarily by the process of learning, as we learn through the five senses we have. These are learning, knowing without learning, if I can say that. But it's quite very tricky, and but that's the beauty of logotherapy, because it allows us to be aware of this other dimension which we might not be able to define completely. Is like, I hope I'm not prolonging this discussion, is like the concept of ultimate meaning. One cannot define it that this is ultimate meaning, but we can only believe that there is an ultimate meaning, and we perceive it from moment to moment in our own personal experience. I don't know if that makes sense. So that's actually, for me, I believe the argument for a new paradigm, that when we deal with other human beings, we should be open to that spiritual dimension, which does not present as the material world we are living in. Sorry if it has brought more confusion, but the most important thing is to say Frankl brings us the concept of spirituality, which allows us to link the body to the mind. And this concept, it's not only for other people in Europe or for Jewish, it's applicable to all human beings. It's an universal concept of what it is to be a human being. Ours is to be aware of how each individual from their cultural background, they experience that.
Dr. Kanda, am I allowed a bit
Yes.
am I allowed
Yes,
a quick commercial?
No, go ahead, go ahead.
On our conversation series, we have
Yes.
a girl who specializes she's a logotherapist, and she's going to talk about meaning and money.
Okay.
So you brought that up earlier. She's running 2 whole sessions on that for anyone who's interested. Okay.
No, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. I thought the world we are in today, because we mentioned it in the previous discussion as well, the crisis we are living was around poverty. We are living in an environment where some few people have access to all these money and others are struggling in deep poverty and so on. To some it even brings hopelessness and helplessness. So the question is, are we here just for money, for the sake of money? That's the question, and that's why I've suggested that money without love would lead to addiction, because look, many of us have lost our loved one, our family members, our children, our parents, because we are busy looking, searching for money, wanting to make more money. I've seen it in many sessions. People going abroad because they find a job, leaving their loved one, and coming back with money and realizing they've got all this money, but they've got no connection with anyone because the connection has been lost. And yeah, so yeah, I hope if I have an opportunity to join the conversation, but that conversation is very important in this environment within which we are. So the other warning as well stand that talk about freedom and freedom and freedom of will, talk about power, empowering people. But the more we are empowered, are we also realizing the more we are empowered, the more we have to exercise responsibility, the more we have to be accountable in the power we hold, because without that, we hurt other people. And the same with knowledge and wisdom. But thank you for the commercial, and I hope those who would attend to this important conversation.
It's going to address both sides of money, that chasing money and without money. So it should be really interesting. Thanks, Dr. Kanda. That was wonderful.
Thank you, Dr. Kanda. It was very insightful. Made lots of notes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Remember, my presentation are more of, they are not final statements. They are presentation to create an environment for us to reflect and deepen our knowledge in logotherapy. But thank you for attending, and I look forward to seeing you in other discussion. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Dr. Kanda.
And thanks, Robert.
Good evening. Take care, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye, Ken.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Excellent.
Bye.